Welcome to the Thriving Mayor Show, the weekly broadcast featuring former and current mayors who are thriving, sharing their story, insight, wisdom, and viewpoint. Join us and comment on social media as we meet another of the superheroes we elect to lead the rejuvenation of our towns and cities and who serve us all. Visit www.thrivingmayor.com to learn more. Here we go. Good morning, everyone. I'm Mike Hibicki, the host of the Thriving Mayor Show. It's December 23rd, 2020, and I'm really happy and honored today to have Steve Cunningham as a guest on the show. And Steve is the founder of readitfor.me, a really amazing platform that I've been using for over a year now. And Steve and I are going to talk quite a bit about that platform and some of the other initiatives that he started, and why we're bringing those forward to help support mayors. So welcome, Steve.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
It's great. It's great to see you here. And where are you located today?
I am in San Antonio, Texas.
And typical. And Steve's also Canadian and has lived down in San Antonio for 3 years. So typical Canadian question, Steve. What's the weather?
The weather today is very nice, like room temperature, which is, I think, about normal for this time of year. It's been over the past 3 years, I've grown less and less Canadian. So when it gets a little cold here, we have to put on a vest or something like that. It feels like we're freezing.
Yeah.
So I think I have to revoke my Canadian citizenship at some point.
Oh, don't do that. And up here in on the Bay of Quinte, we have ice fishing huts out already, and they've been out probably about 10 days now. Even though we're starting to see some in the warmer temperature water on the ice, but the fishermen are still going out and a lot braver than I am. I just wanted to introduce Steve by sharing a few of the points that he's listed on his LinkedIn profile. And Steve's got a really unique LinkedIn introduction, and it says 10 things you should know about me. One of them is that Steve was a lawyer for a week. Another is that he reads a book a day. And another one is that he played NCAA hockey. And one of the things that he learned was not to mistake activity for productivity. So Steve, can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, our coach at the time, who was a very outgoing coach and would have lots of mostly not nice things to say about us when we weren't doing the things that we were supposed to be doing. And, one of the things that he would always like to harp on is, we'd have a system and a strategy for how we were supposed to play the game. And just because we were out there skating hard and working hard and looking like we were doing something productive doesn't mean that we were doing something productive. And so we're always coached back to playing to the plan and trying to get the results that we all agreed that, mostly he agreed that we would want to get. So, that's, I actually haven't thought about that one for a long time. So I'm glad you brought that up. And it's something that I think is relevant for anybody who's developing themselves or developing organizations. Just because you're doing stuff doesn't mean that you're producing the result. Quite often we mistake the two.
Yeah. And obviously you were younger in those days, but I think, like, to me, when I look at your products and what you're doing with the service, the gifts that you're bringing to us that we can then share with our clientele and the people that we serve, it really is so heavily focused on action, taking action. And it's interesting that I see this thread through your journey that's then now come into my journey. And really, I find it really intriguing and powerful, the tools that you're giving us that then we can share. And I just want to mention as well that I use Steve's products. I use Read It For Me, and I use Action Class, and I'm developing my own profile, my own dashboard in Skill Academy. We've got a comment here from Russ Johns. Love the platform and thanks for developing it, Steve. And Russ is the host of the Pirate broadcast, and I was a guest on his show last month, and I'm learning a lot from Russ as well on my journey. So thank you for that, Russ. So Steve, can you maybe just share a little bit about how, or let's go back to being a lawyer for a week. What's that story?
So I'd gone to law school, and in Canada, as you know, I don't know if we've got folks from around the world listening and tuning in. There's a year between when you end law school and when you actually become a lawyer, and it's called articling. So basically, like an apprenticeship year. And I decided during that year that I wasn't going to pursue law as a career, but I was still committed to getting called to the bar and finishing up, so that at some point in the future, if I wanted to go back, that I could. So I finished that up, got called to the bar, and the law firm that I was working at had asked me to stick around for a week so that I could finish up a file that I was working on. And so I agreed, and I thought, this will be a good story to tell for the rest of my life, that I was an actual lawyer for exactly 1 week. So that's the story there, and that was kind of the launching point of all the things that we were doing and have been doing for the last several years at Read It For Me.
So you say launching point. What was that first initiative that kind of catapulted you down this new pathway, this new journey?
So I'll rewind and kind of to the beginning of law school, and I'll tell you just a little bit of the story. So if you know anybody who's gone to law school, they'll tell you that it's 3 years of reading an insane amount of information every single day, like hundreds of pages of stuff a night, and then furiously taking notes and summarizing what you're reading so that the next day you're not embarrassed by your professor in front of all your friends. And that just goes on repeat 5 days a week for 3 years. So what happens is you get really good at summarizing information, finding the main points and things very quickly. So that was something I learned in law school. So when I joined the family business, that's what I did after that year of articling. At the time, it was a signage company, and my father made me the president of the company.
Wow.
Very quickly, which was not any, I don't know, maybe not the best decision ever made in business history. So anyways, as I joke, law school does a very bad job of preparing you to be a lawyer, and even worse job of preparing you to run a business. So I had no clue what I was doing. So I just did the only thing I knew how to do, which was I went out to the bookstore when we still went out to the bookstore to buy our books.
Yeah.
And bought as many business books as I could find, furiously read them, made my own notes, just like I was doing in law school. And so what I ended up with was summaries of a bunch of these business books. And as I was reading those books, a lot of them were marketing, because that's one of the most important things you do as a business is getting customers. And so, and all of the marketing books were super fascinating. The people who wrote them were fascinating. It seemed like they had these really fun, exciting lives. And so I decided that I was going to create a marketing agency. Again, not a great decision, but I did it. And that was around the time when social media was starting to become a thing for business. And at that time, for whatever reason, I had a few thousand Twitter followers, and that seemingly qualified me to become a keynote speaker on the topic. So as I tell my story, it's always like things are just happening by accident. And it continues into this day. And so I went around the country in North America speaking about social media, and it was super easy to get people to take my calls or have meetings because we were doing what I now know is called free consulting. It's a bad idea. They wanted to pick my brain, and I gladly went around and allowed CEOs and VPs of marketing to do that. And so now I'm going to get to the point. So when I was in there, and this is where the Read It For Me origin story comes from, they would always have a stack of books on their desk. And invariably, I'd read one or two or three of them because I had read all of the ones that were relevant at the time. And so I would just try to create some rapport. I'd say, hey, what did you think about that idea from this book and this idea from that book? And they would stare back at me blankly, maybe fold their arms, and then finally sheepishly admit that they hadn't read the book.
Right.
And, more than one of them said something along the lines of, I wish somebody would just read it for me.
Oh,
So,
cool.
which is where the name Read It For Me came from.
Yeah.
And so what I did was I was like, oh, I made a bunch of notes on that book. I'll send it to you. So I did. They liked it. And then we thought, well, the only way we're going to get somebody to hire us to do social media marketing, because at the time there was no case studies of somebody doing it successfully, and nobody wanted to be the first one to hire somebody and pay them a lot of money to do it. So we decided we're going to try to create our own social media case study. And so we took some of the summaries that I had been creating, turned them into video with the idea that people would start passing them around, and that would drive traffic back to our website. And so it was essentially a content marketing strategy before anybody was calling it content marketing.
Right.
And so we sent it to 10 people, that turned into 100, turned into 1,000. So it worked. And then along the way, people started asking us, well, can we pay you to access this content? We'd say, no, don't worry about it. It's free. And they say, no, you don't understand. I want you to keep doing this, and I want to pay you to become a customer because I know that's the only way you're going to keep doing it. So, and I'm a slow learner, but eventually we caught on that, making money while we were sleeping would be a fun and good thing to do.
Yeah.
So we put up a PayPal paywall just to see what would happen. People started paying us, and so that's how Read It For Me was born.
Wow, that's an awesome story. And I get it kind of brings back the old adage that if you do something you love, your career finds you. And like to me, that this seems to really resonate with me. That and you say these things keep happening by accident almost, but it really is an accident. It's super neat. So what happened to the business when you left? Was it a cold stop and you walked out the door, or did you the one your dad's business, the signage business?
No, they all continued to operate for some time, and we eventually shut down the signage company. We eventually shut down the marketing company, and so it was all kind of happening over a long period of time.
Yeah,
It wasn't just cold turkey. We were doing this slowly and methodically.
Yeah. And talking about books, Steve, I understand that you've got a book in the works as well.
I've been threatening to write a book for a few years now. We're still not there yet. We're continuing to learn. Part of the journey has been meeting folks like you and helping them turn knowledge into action and results, and helping create communities that are doing that. So we're still in I would say the research phase of that, but eventually it'll come out.
Yeah. Turning knowledge into action. Can you explain a little bit, Steve, about your concept of the action loop?
Yeah. So one day I woke up, and at the time I was reading a book a day. That's actually not true anymore. But I was reading a ton of information. Most of it was my job. But I woke up one day. So when I moved from Toronto to San Antonio, I took some of the stuff out of storage and packed a box with some books in it that I would put on my nightstand when we got here. And one of them was a book with the collective writings of Charlie Munger, who is the right-hand man to Warren Buffett. And it's kind of a cult business hero. And if you see anything about mental models online, it originates with his thinking. And every once in a while, I'll just open it up and I would leaf through and kind of let the wisdom wash over me. And I read a quote in that book that was from a guy from the 1800s. And it said, the most valuable result of all education is the ability to make yourself do the thing that ought to be done when it ought to be done, whether you like it or not. And it struck me as the most profound thing that I had ever read around the idea of personal development.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that I found it profound because apparently it was at least the second time I had read that, because I had underlined it, starred it, highlighted it. And when I read it, I had no recollection of ever doing that. And so it dawned on me kind of like one of those sixth sense moments where everything kind of plops into place. And I thought, I'm reading all of this stuff, thousands of pages a month, and what do I have to show for it? What can I pinpoint as the thing that has actually changed?
Mm. Yeah.
And I realized that I had been not doing what that quote said you need to do. And so that kind of set me off on a journey to figure out, what's the difference between somebody who's super successful and somebody who's not, and learning how they turn knowledge into action, and where does that happen with individuals, where does it happen with companies. And the essence of it is kind of like the scientific method, which is when you're consuming information, what you're really just doing is planning to do something different.
Mm.
That's kind of the start of this journey. And we've had this idea of the action loop for a long time, and we've made iterations on it. But the essence of it is consuming information is just about creating a plan to put something into action. Then you actually have to go do the plan. You have to do the action. Then in order for things to actually get better, you need to look at, well, what happened, because don't mistake productivity or activity for productivity. And just if you did something doesn't mean it worked. And then you need to integrate that back into your way of doing things moving forward if you want to continue to get the result, if it worked.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the idea behind the loop. And most people who are personal development junkies would stop halfway through that first bit, which is they consume the information. It feels good. Maybe they talk about ideas with other people, but they don't actively get into the doing.
Mm-hmm.
What I realized over a long period of time was that, that's exactly what I did. That's exactly what most people I knew did. But there's some very successful people who did not do it that way, and they kind of followed that loop that I just described. And
Mm-hmm.
one of the reasons may be that that's how we're taught how to learn in school. We consume information, and as long as we have the knowledge in our head, we've won. And so it's kind of this illusion of growth that's going on when we're consuming all of this information.
Yeah, that's super powerful, and for me personally, Steve, that was really an aha moment for me in 2013 when I read Carol Dweck's book Mindset. And I'd been successful at school, being able to take the information in and regurgitate it in a paper or test or exam or whatever. But after I read that book, I realized that most of my life I'd had a fixed mindset. That once I brought the information in, I thought about it, or I tried it a little bit. If I couldn't succeed, if I couldn't excel quickly, then I'd move on to the next thing. And it's a type of procrastination, I guess. But like for me, that light bulb went off. And when I understood the difference between the fixed mindset and the growth mindset, and then to move into that growth mindset and embrace trying, mistakes, failure, just because we failed doesn't mean we're a failure. It made a huge difference. And when I discovered Read It For Me, and then the next iteration, what was the action loop, and then action class, which we'll talk about next, another aha moment for me, that you've developed this really powerful collaborative forum with amazing content and a super concise 1 hour almost collaborative workshop that we get together and we come up with actions, and then we hold each other accountable. So maybe can you just explain or describe the next transition into that part of your development?
Yeah, so it kind of happened over 3 phases. The first phase was when we started Read It For Me. We originally thought it was going to be a service for people who wanted to be successful someday. So, new first-time managers, people who are just out of school, those types of folks. And what we realized after we started looking at who was actually paying us was that it was a tool for people who were already successful. So very successful people were embedding our summaries into their growth and development routine.
Right.
And one of the things that we realized was we would always get book summary requests. Do you have this book in the library? And what I found was that less successful people would always ask us for the books that were currently on the New York Times bestsellers list because they didn't want to take the time to read them, which is fine. But the more successful people were asking us for specific books that were related to a specific problem that they were trying to deal with in the moment. And so that became the first shift in what we did, which was we started summarizing books that were related to the most important problems that successful people were trying to solve versus just summarizing the most popular books. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that as we started to unpack exactly how they, once they got a summary, like what were they doing with it? And one of my mentors, his name's Graham Weston, here in San Antonio. And I spent a bunch of time trying to figure out how he learns differently than most other people. And he does. And he had a hard time articulating it because if you know any very successful people, they have a hard time understanding that they do things differently than other people. They think, well, everybody must do it this way. And of course, that's not true. Not everybody does it that way. But eventually we figured out that he would, ask for a book summary. He's looking for I have this problem. What are the world's top experts on this issue? How can I consume what they say I should do quickly and then just make a decision so that I can get into action? So he's kind of doing the 80-20 rule on the whole process. And so that led us to the second iteration, which was we started producing what we called at the time micro courses, which were, okay, here's a problem, like difficult conversations. And it is an example I always use because it seems like every leader needs to get better at having difficult conversations.
Or parent.
Anybody. Yeah. It's a problem. So we would go out and find the top 3 books on the topic, put them together in a bundle. So that was the second iteration that we did. And then we noticed that very successful people were always in a peer group. And before they actually implemented their action plan out of this whole thing, I got a problem, I need to understand what the experts say, and I'm going to formulate my own plan. They would always bounce it off of other people. And so they had a forum, and a lot of CEOs are in what are called peer advisory groups. And so we noticed that they were doing, getting feedback before they were implementing their actions. So a couple of years ago, we tried to mimic this experience in Read It For Me. We called it Masterclass. Before, everybody called everything Masterclass, as I now like to joke. And it went well. At the time, we couldn't figure out how to scale it because it took some work for us to even put I needed 2 laptops to stream content, and it was using WebEx, and it just wasn't an easy thing to do. So the customer experience of it was really high, but our ability to translate that into something we could scale, we just couldn't figure it out. So fast forward to the crisis, a couple of years later, this idea is still bubbling in my head. Like, we need to solve this problem and put it all together. Coaches started reaching out to us asking, like, can we use your content? Can I buy some accounts to give away to people? Can I use it to engage with my network? Because they were just struggling with the reality of all of their speaking engagements were delayed or canceled. All of their client retainers have been delayed or canceled, and they just need something to stay in front of people. So we said, okay, let's take that idea that worked a couple of years ago. Let's give it to some coaches and see if it works. And we renamed it Action Class because there was the company Masterclass now, and everybody had a Masterclass or something. So, and then we just created a process where we wanted to change the context of the learning. So rather than it being, let's consume some information and talk about it, it's let's start with what are we trying to accomplish, and let's make a plan before we leave. And then let's bounce it off of somebody else before we leave and get feedback so that when we leave the session, we've got a plan to do something that's been vetted, generated by some new thinking, vetted by some other smart people, and committed to before you left. So within an hour, we've created this experience that we call now Action Class. It's hard to explain without people experiencing it. Most people think, well, you want me to come to another Zoom call or another crappy webinar, great. Super pumped about that. But the experience when people leave, because we ask these 3 questions at the end of every action class. One, did you leave today with an action plan you didn't have when you came in? 2, was that action plan made stronger by the people in your breakout room? And 3, did you meet somebody today you'd value staying connected with? And 99.9% of people answer yes to all 3 of those questions. And so it's just kind of been the accumulation of all the things that we've been noticing and working on for the last 10 years. It's the right time to have this kind of a platform, because the last several months, the entire planet got a crash course on Zoom calls or Microsoft Teams, whatever tool you're using. And so everybody's comfortable with this environment now. And so it was just right place at the right time. And
yeah. And if I could add a personal note on this as well, Steve, is that we're getting more comfortable with digital video media, Zoom or Teams or whatever. But what we're not necessarily getting more comfortable or more adept at is talking with each other and being there in the smaller groups. And my personal experience in action class with you facilitating was that all the participants in it are we obviously get great content, but then it's a safe, it's a powerful, collaborative environment where we can share our ideas, the challenges that we're facing, and between each other. I've had a group as small as 2, and I've had a group as big as 4, and all of those different groups that our breakout rooms are really valuable. The 2 people, you get much more of a personalized conversation going, so you can get into the topic a little bit more in depth. But the 4 people, you get a much broader perspective and feedback. And so all of these, I think, are adding to another skill, a communication skill that we haven't really been able to necessarily get access to. So to me, that's what really differentiates Action Class and Skill Academy from so many of these other platforms that are trying to just give us more information, or even a course, for example. So we download a course, we buy it. There's a Facebook group on it that there's a little bit of conversation, but the actions don't take place. We're not held accountable. It's not instantaneous, and that speed of implementation is so critical to everything that we do, especially when we're being creative and we're trying to ideate and then push these ideas forward into action. Is speed of implementation. So my hat's off to you. It's a fantastic platform, and I get so much from it every week when I join.
Well, thank you, and we're always excited to have you on, and the value that you bring to the community is immense. And you mentioned something about with me facilitating. I just want to point out that the process is what's powerful, not necessarily any one person facilitating it, because what we do in the call is we send people off into breakout rooms, and I don't go into those rooms. So there is no facilitator, and the process, because the process starts with what's important to you, what are you trying to accomplish, and then what's a problem that's standing in your way, and then here's your plan to overcome it. That's just naturally engaging for people, and it sets the stage for actually talking about what are you going to do, because as soon as you present a problem, our brains are wired to solve problems. And so we say that context is greater than content. So rather than talking about the concepts in the content, we're talking about here's a problem and how are we going to solve it, and maybe pull from some of that information. And so the context of these sessions is what is by far the most important. And then the people, bringing the people together, so that you can have that dialogue and diverse viewpoints and getting something completed into action.
Yeah, and speaking of context, one of the areas that I'd like to start to promote action classes is into municipalities, into cities and towns, that the organization, the city or town can purchase action class, then the employees can access it and host I would be hosting action classes for that particular municipality and developing tailor-made curriculum based on the challenges that they're facing at that point in time, or maybe an opportunity that's ahead of them. So that context becomes very personalized to that particular place and that particular time and those particular people, that they all come together with their own unique perspective, and in 1 hour, are going to come up with a super powerful collaborative answer. So I think that's something that could be. I'm really excited about launching into the new year.
Yeah, we're excited to be working with you as well.
Yeah. And then Skill Academy, Steve, is another fairly new initiative that I'm really happy to be part of as well. And I'm offering a Skill Academy for mayors under the Thriving Mayor name banner. And to me, the really interesting thing about Skill Academy is how that you've blended personal development with the group learning, the group collaboration part of it. And can you just explain a little bit about Skill Academy and how it developed and the power of it?
Yeah. So one of the things that we're trying to do with Action Class first was, how do we get people into action? And then with Skill Academy is, how do we develop a platform that helps make visible what would otherwise be invisible, which is, how are you developing in these areas of importance? And so we built out a few competency models that most of our Skill Academy coaches are using. One for leadership, one for soft skills, which is the two that most leaders use or coaches use, and then one for sales and marketing. But the idea is, if you're going to develop yourself in the area of, let's say, difficult conversations, the real development happens when you do something differently that then produces a better result. So what we've tried to create is a platform that lets you see your progress, document exactly what are you going to do, and then run it very much like an experiment. And if it works, we have you create what we would call a personal practice. So you end up adopting new ways of doing things, and you document them when they work, and then that allows you, in the context of a group, to share with each other, here's what I do around these areas that are important, like difficult conversations, and here's how I build teams, and here's how I manage performance, and all of those kinds of things, so that when one person in the group gets better, everybody can get better. And so you may have a way of handling difficult conversations that is different than mine, and I can look at it and say, well, that seems like it might help me do that better, and I can I can try what you did, and I can start to make it my own. So it's this way of group development, where we're trying to speed up the process of everybody getting better by putting everybody into a group of common, like-minded people.
Yeah, and actually, here's another comment from Roxanne. Why did you choose Read It For Me and Skill Academy for mayors? And I introduced, I kind of explained that a little bit, but for me, another really interesting aspect of Skill Academy, and I think, Steve, you already alluded to this, is that the coach can tailor the content so that the Read It For Me content is self-development, leadership, and sales and marketing. But if we have a customer, clientele, or people that we're working with, like such as mayors, then I can also tailor information and practices to some particular issues or needs or desires that they have. And the one stream that we're introducing into the Thriving Mayor Skill Academy is Legacy by Design, and that's the living and lasting legacy. And the living legacy is just what are we doing every day to thrive? And it's from our sleep, our nutrition, spirituality, emotion, our emotional intelligence, and things like that, which is kind of tying in a little bit with the softer side, or the soft skills, personal development. But we're able to really tailor that as we start to get feedback from the group through the action classes. And again, speaking from personal experience, the feedback mechanism is so instantaneous to you in action class, you know right away, is this working? Should we tweak this? Is there something else that we want to get into to look at? So Steve, we're just over our 30 minutes. I really want to say thank you so much, and super appreciate you being on the show and helping to again explain how Read It For Me and Skill Academy and Action Class came about. I can't believe how fast our 30 minutes went. And just again say that it's such a powerful platforms that you're developing, that I'm super excited to be bringing those out to serve mayors in the new year.
We're excited to be working with you, and thanks for having me on. It's been fun.
Awesome. And to conclude, I wanted to, as Steve has said in his top 2 LinkedIn things that we need to know about him, is again share my gratitude for this community and for the people that I've met over the year in 2020, even though it's been such a challenging year with COVID and the pandemic, that I'm so super grateful for the people in my life and their lives, and especially our mayors and our councillors and the people in our cities and towns that are keeping our municipalities running so successfully, and doing the hard work that somebody needs to do, and often now in even more lonely conditions and isolated conditions that they've ever experienced before. So we're really looking forward to using some of the my expertise and my energy and special platforms and tools like what Steve's created to help to bridge that gap and to create some more connectivity and new opportunities for mayors to come together. Just a couple of quick thanks for the show, Michael, and obviously Steve as well. Sounds powerful. Thanks, guys. And then Russ, again, thanks for the great efforts, Steve. So this is the last show of 2020, and I'd just like to wish everyone a really safe and wonderful holiday season. And again, from the bottom of my heart, I'm just super grateful for everyone that's helping to keep us safe and comfortable and healthy in our communities. So thanks again, Steve, and see you in the new year.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Michael.
Yeah. Thank you for joining the Thriving Mayor Show. Make sure to like and share and tell your friends and colleagues. Mayors are awesome and are the change agents to enhance the quality of living for over 80% of us. Remember what Coach Wooden said, you cannot live a perfect day without doing something for someone who can never repay you. Much love and peace. Until next time.